I've been lurking here for a while, but I never thought I'd be writing a post like this. My name is Emily, and I'm a 27-year-old architect. I've worked hard to get where I am. I run my own small but successful firm and just landed a massive project designing a shopping center. To outsiders, my life probably looks perfect. I have a thriving career, a supportive family, and, until recently, I thought I had found the love of my life. My fiancé, Ryan, is my dad's assistant. That's how we met, at one of those stuffy business dinners I used to dread attending. He was charming, attentive, and somehow made me feel like the only person in the room. My dad absolutely adores him and has always said Ryan is one of the most hard-working people he's ever hired. Things moved fast between us. Ryan proposed after a year of dating, and my dad was so thrilled that he offered to buy us a beautiful apartment as an early wedding gift. I thought I was living a fairy tale, until the cracks started to show. Ryan's been acting different lately. At first, I thought it was just the stress of wedding planning. He's been coming home later, claiming he's swamped at work. He's been glued to his phone, and when I asked him about it, he brushed me off, saying I was being paranoid. I told myself not to overthink it. I've always been a bit of a worrier, and Ryan knows how to calm me down. But there was one thing I couldn't shake, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. And then there's my best friend, Jessica. She's been my rock since college. Beautiful, confident, the kind of girl who lights up every room she walks into. Lately, though, she's been distant. She skips our usual brunches and takes forever to respond to texts. I chalked it up to her busy life. She's always juggling a million things. But looking back, I wonder if I should have noticed the signs sooner. I've been pouring myself into work to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. Last night, I stayed at the office until midnight, perfecting the layout for the shopping center project. Exhausted but proud of my progress, I drove home, hoping to crawl into bed and finally get some rest. I was so tired when I got home that I almost missed it. The apartment was dimly lit, with soft music playing in the background. Frank Sinatra, Ryan's favorite. For a moment, I felt guilty for working so late. Maybe he'd planned a surprise for me? I kicked off my heels, already picturing us curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. But as I stepped into the living room, my heart dropped. Ryan was there, sitting on the couch, leaning way too close to someone. It took me a second to realize it was Jessica. She was laughing softly, holding a wine glass, her hair falling perfectly over one shoulder. They didn't see me at first. I froze in the doorway, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Ryan was whispering something to her, his hand resting casually on her knee. It wasn't just friendly. It was intimate. My breath caught, and they both turned to look at me. Jessica straightened up, her eyes wide with what I can only describe as fake surprise. "Emily, you're home early," she said like she hadn't been caught red-handed. Ryan stood quickly, his face a mix of guilt and irritation. "Hey, babe," he said like nothing was wrong. "Just stopped by to talk about some things." "Talk about what?" My voice was sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. The exhaustion and confusion hit me all at once. There was a long pause, and then Jessica spoke, her tone light and breezy. "Just catching up, you know. I haven't seen you much lately, so I thought I'd check in with Ryan." "Catching up?" "Right." Over wine and whispers in the middle of the night. Ryan put his arm around my shoulder, but it felt wrong, forced. "You've been so busy with work, Em. I didn't want to bother you." His voice was calm, soothing, like he was trying to convince me I was imagining things. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, but another part, the naive, hopeful part, wanted to believe him. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe I was overreacting. So, I swallowed my doubts and forced a smile. "Okay," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm going to bed. You should too. It's late." Jessica stood up, brushing invisible dust off her dress. "Yeah, I should get going," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "Good night, Emily." As she left, I felt a strange hollowness settle in my chest. Ryan kissed my forehead, murmuring something about how I needed rest. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly, irreversibly wrong. The next morning, I woke up feeling heavy, like I hadn't slept at all. Ryan was already gone, which wasn't unusual. He often left early for work. But there was a strange stillness in the apartment, an emptiness that made me feel more alone than I'd ever felt before. I replayed the scene from the night before in my head, trying to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Jessica and Ryan were just talking, right? They've known each other almost as long as Ryan and I have been together. Maybe I really was overthinking it. But the way they'd looked at each other, the way Jessica had been sitting so close to him, it didn't feel right. And then there was that little voice in the back of my mind, whispering things I didn't want to hear. I decided to push it aside and focus on work. My project for the shopping center was my biggest yet, and I couldn't afford any distractions. I buried myself in sketches, zoning regulations, and client emails. For a few hours it worked. I almost forgot about the unease gnawing at me. But during lunch, when I checked my phone, there was a message from Jessica. Jessica, hey, sorry about last night. Hope I didn't interrupt anything. Let's catch up soon. Love you. It felt so fake. Jessica wasn't one to apologize, and she certainly didn't throw around love you casually. Was she trying to smooth things over? Or was she just trying to cover her tracks? I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at her text, my mind spinning. The doubt was turning into something darker now, suspicion. That evening, when Ryan came home, I decided to bring it up. Not directly. I didn't want to start a fight, but I needed some reassurance. How was work? I asked as we sat down to dinner. Busy, he said, not looking up from his plate. I hesitated. You and Jessica seemed close last night. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said quickly, feeling stupid for even bringing it up. I don't know. It was late and it seemed kind of odd. Ryan put his fork down and reached across the table for my hand. Emily, you're stressed. You've been working so hard, and I know you're exhausted. Jess and I were just catching up. That's all. You have nothing to worry about. His words were soothing, but his tone felt off, like he was trying too hard. Still, I nodded, forcing a smile. Okay, I said, even though my gut was screaming at me that it wasn't okay. That night, as Ryan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The doubt wasn't just creeping in anymore, it was taking over. Part 4. Signs and Secrets. The days that followed were a blur. I threw myself even harder into work, hoping to drown out the gnawing doubts in my head. But no matter how busy I kept myself, little things kept popping up. Tiny details that didn't seem important at first but started to pile up like a jigsaw puzzle I didn't want to complete. Ryan was on his phone more than ever, and it wasn't just texting. Sometimes I'd walk into the room, and he'd quickly end a call or angle the screen away from me. When I asked who he was talking to, he'd say it was work or some excuse that didn't quite add up. Jessica, too, was acting strange. She texted me more often than usual, but avoided making any actual plans to meet up. When we did talk, she'd steer the conversation away from Ryan, almost like she was afraid I'd asked her something. One evening, I came home earlier than usual and found Ryan on the couch with his laptop. He didn't notice me at first, his headphones were in, and he was smiling at the screen. When I walked closer, he quickly slammed the laptop shut, his face going pale. Hey, I said, forcing a casual tone. What are you working on? Just emails, he said, slipping his headphones off and standing up like he couldn't wait to get away from the laptop. How was your day? It was the kind of red flag you don't want to see, but it's impossible to ignore once it's there. Emails, I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. You know, boring stuff. Anyway, want a glass of wine? I'll pour us some. I watched as he hurried into the kitchen, leaving the laptop untouched on the couch. My curiosity burned, but I hesitated. Snooping wasn't me. I'd always prided myself on being someone who trusted people, someone who gave the benefit of the doubt. But this wasn't just about trust anymore. It was about the sinking feeling that something was being hidden from me. When Ryan came back with the wine, I pretended to be distracted by my phone. He chatted about his day, but his words felt hollow, like he was reciting a script. That night, after Ryan had fallen asleep, I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling again. My heart ached, not just because of the doubts, but because of how much I wanted them to be wrong. I didn't want to be that girl who second-guessed everything. I didn't want to believe that Ryan, my Ryan, could betray me. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't know what to do about it. The next few days were a test of my sanity. Every interaction with Ryan felt like walking on eggshells. His reassurances sounded hollow, and his casual affection, a kiss on my cheek, a hand on my back, felt like a performance. Jessica was still texting, but her messages were vague and overly sweet, like she was trying to keep me at arm's length while also making sure I didn't get suspicious. One afternoon, I decided to take a break from work and meet with one of my closest colleagues, Sarah. Sarah's been my sounding board for years, someone who's brutally honest but never judgmental. We met at a quiet cafe near the office, and it wasn't long before I spilled everything. "Something's going on, Sarah," I said, stirring my coffee so aggressively the spoon clinked against the cup. "I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but Ryan and Jessica, they're acting weird." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Weird how?" I hesitated. "It's just, the other night I came home late and they were drinking wine together. Alone." He said they were just talking, but the way they were sitting, the way they looked at each other, it didn't feel right. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Have you confronted him about it?" Kind of, I admitted. "But he just says I'm overthinking it, that I'm stressed with work." Sarah gave me a long, steady look. "Emily, you're not stupid. If your gut's telling you something's wrong, it probably is." Her words hit me hard. I wanted to argue, to defend Ryan, but deep down, I knew she was right. "Do you think I should confront him again?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet," she said after a moment. "You need proof first. Otherwise, he'll just gaslight you into thinking you're crazy." Proof. The word made my stomach churn. I hated the idea of digging into Ryan's life, of turning into someone who snoops and spies. But Sarah was right. I couldn't live in this limbo forever. That night, I went home with a new resolve. If Ryan was hiding something, I needed to know. When he came home, I watched him closely. He was cheerful, almost too cheerful, as if he was trying to make up for the tension between us. "Long day?" he asked, pouring himself a drink. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "How about you?" Same old," he replied, sitting next to me on the couch. He put his arm around me, and I leaned into him, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe everything was fine. Maybe I was overreacting. But then his phone buzzed, and he grabbed it quickly, holding it at an angle where I couldn't see the screen. That knot tightened. I excused myself to the bathroom, my mind racing. Proof. I needed proof. That night, after Ryan fell asleep, I lay in bed staring at his phone on the nightstand. The soft glow of the screen taunted me, as if daring me to pick it up. I hated myself for even considering it, but Sarah's words echoed in my mind. "You need proof." I reached for it slowly, my hands trembling. Ryan's phone was password protected, of course, but I knew the code, his favorite basketball player's jersey number. It unlocked easily, and my heart pounded as I scrolled through his recent messages. At first, everything looked normal. Work emails, group chats with his coworkers. I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I saw her name, Jessica. There weren't many messages, which seemed odd. Jessica and I text all the time, so why would their thread look so empty? Unless... My stomach dropped as I realized what it meant. He deleted messages. There was one message left, though, sent earlier that day. "Jessica, can't stop thinking about last night. When can we talk?" Last night? What happened last night? My mind raced as I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. It could mean anything, I told myself. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the timing felt too perfect. Ryan's sudden change in behavior, Jessica's weird distance, and now this cryptic message. It was like puzzle pieces clicking into place, and the picture they were forming was something I didn't want to see. I put the phone back exactly where it had been and slipped out of bed, my heart racing. In the living room, I paced back and forth, trying to calm down. What should I do? Confront him now? Wait and see if there was more? Or should I call Jessica and demand answers? I felt trapped, like the walls of the apartment were closing in on me. This place, our home, the apartment my father had so generously given us, suddenly felt foreign, like it wasn't mine anymore. I decided to wait. As much as I wanted to scream and cry and demand the truth, I needed more. One text wasn't enough, not for Ryan. He was too good at talking his way out of things, too good at making me doubt myself. So I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my face, and went back to bed. But I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long it would take for the truth to come crashing down. The next morning, I felt like a zombie. My lack of sleep, combined with the weight of what I'd found, made it almost impossible to function. Ryan noticed my mood at breakfast. "You okay?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Yeah, just tired," I said, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. He nodded, not pressing further, and I watched as he grabbed his bag and left for work. The second the door clicked shut, I felt a wave of relief. At least now I could think without the pressure of pretending everything was fine. I knew what I had to do. If Ryan and Jessica were hiding something, they'd have to slip up eventually. And if they weren't, then at least I could put my mind at ease. That evening, when Ryan got home, I played it cool. I asked him about his day, made small talk about wedding planning, and acted like nothing was bothering me. If he suspected anything, he didn't show it. But as soon as he went to bed, I got back to work. This time, I checked his laptop. It was risky. I'd never touched his laptop before, and I wasn't sure if he had a password on it. But when I opened it, I was surprised to find it unlocked. My hands shook as I navigated to his email. At first, everything seemed normal. Work emails, random subscriptions, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I noticed a folder labeled personal. I clicked on it. Inside were a few emails that made my blood run cold. One in particular caught my eye. From Jessica. Subject: last weekend. Hey, just wanted to say, I can't stop thinking about Saturday night. I know we said it was a mistake, but it didn't feel like one. Let me know when we can talk. Gee. My hands flew to my mouth as I reread the email, hoping I'd misunderstood. But there it was in black and white. Undeniable proof. My mind raced. What had happened last weekend? I've been working late at the office all Saturday. Ryan had told me he'd spent the evening relaxing at home. Clearly, that wasn't the full story. I felt sick. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the lies, the way he'd looked me in the eye and acted like nothing was wrong. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for what felt like hours, trying to process what I'd just found. I thought about waking Ryan up and confronting him right then and there, but I stopped myself. I needed a plan. If I was going to face him and Jessica, I had to be prepared. No more excuses, no more doubts. This was the beginning of the end. The next day, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every email, every call, every meeting blurred together as my mind kept replaying Jessica's email. By the time lunch rolled around, I'd made up my mind. I needed to talk to her. I texted her, keeping my tone light. "Me, hey, free for coffee today? I miss you, Red Heart." She replied almost immediately, which surprised me. "Jessica, of course. How about 4 p.m. at our usual spot?" I didn't know whether to feel relieved or furious. Part of me wondered if she knew what I had found and was trying to act normal. At 4 p.m. sharp, I walked into the cafe, scanning the room for her. She waved from a table near the window, her smile as radiant as ever. She looked completely unbothered, like she hadn't been involved in the mess that was now my life. "Hey, Em," she said, standing to hug me. I forced myself to smile and sit across from her, though my stomach churned. "Hey, it's been a while." She laughed, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I know. Life's been so crazy lately. How's the wedding planning going?" Her casual tone was like a slap in the face. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Jessica, I need to ask you something," I said, cutting straight to the point. She blinked, her smile faltering. "Sure. What's up?" I took a deep breath. "Are you having an affair with Ryan?" Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "What? Emily, no. Why would you even think that?" "I saw the email," I said, my voice low but firm. "The one you sent him about last weekend." Jessica's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for words, but couldn't find them. Finally, she let out a nervous laugh. "Emily, that wasn't what it looked like. I was drunk when I wrote that. It was a joke." "A joke?" I repeated, disbelief washing over me. "Yes," she insisted, her voice growing defensive. "Ryan and I were just hanging out, and I was being stupid. I would never." "Stop lying. I snapped, my voice shaking. I saw the way you two were acting the other night, Jessica. You can't tell me that was just a joke. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't move me. I'd seen her cry over countless things before, but this time, it felt like an act. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered, looking down at the table. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. So it did happen, I said, my voice breaking. She looked up at me, her face crumpling. Emily, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. My best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone, and she betrayed me. I stood up, my legs trembling. I don't want to hear any more excuses, I said, my voice cold. I can't believe you'd do this to me. To us. Emily, please, she started, but I didn't let her finish. I turned and walked out of the cafe, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there. I couldn't look at her, hear her voice, or listen to her lies anymore. The truth was out now, and it hurt more than I ever thought it would. After leaving the cafe, I drove around aimlessly, trying to calm myself. Jessica's confession had confirmed what I'd feared, but it left me with even more questions. How long had this been going on? Did Ryan love her? Did he ever love me? By the time I got home, it was late, and Ryan was already there, sitting on the couch with his laptop. He looked up and smiled when I walked in, but I didn't return it. Hey, babe, he said, closing the laptop and standing to greet me. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. Don't, I said, my voice trembling. He frowned, his smile fading. What's wrong? I talked to Jessica, I said, cutting straight to the point. His expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing his face before he quickly masked it. Okay, and she told me everything, I said, my voice rising. About you. About her. About last weekend. Ryan's face went pale, and he took a step back. Emily, it's not what you think. Don't you dare lie to me. I snapped, tears welling in my eyes. She admitted it, Ryan. She admitted the affair. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an escape. I don't know what to say, he finally muttered. How about the truth? I demanded. How long has this been going on? Weeks? Months? Ryan sighed heavily, sinking onto the couch and burying his face in his hands. A few months, he said quietly. It started as, I don't know, just flirting. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. A few months? I repeated, my voice breaking. You've been lying to me for months? It wasn't like that, he said quickly, looking up at me with pleading eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I swear I didn't. It just happened. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. It just happened? That's your excuse? You're engaged to me, Ryan. We were supposed to get married. And you threw it all away for... What? A fling with my best friend? His face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked genuinely remorseful. I'm sorry, Emily. I messed up. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please don't give up on us. Fix this? I said, my voice cold. How do you plan to fix this, Ryan? By erasing what you did? By pretending it never happened? Because I can't. The room fell silent, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy between us. I trusted you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I trusted both of you. Ryan reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. Don't. Just don't. I turned and walked into the bedroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't care. I needed space. Time to think, time to figure out what to do next. As I sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down my face, one thing became clear. This wasn't something I could forgive. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. I had barely slept, and the weight of everything that had happened the day before pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. Ryan had tried knocking on the bedroom door a few times during the night, but I ignored him. When I finally opened the door, he was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked up as I walked into the living room, his face a mix of exhaustion and desperation. Emily, he started, his voice soft. I held up a hand to stop him. Don't. I don't want to hear it. He stood, his movements hesitant. Please, can we just talk? I know I messed up, but we can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I stared at him, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and sadness. Ryan, you slept with my best friend. You lied to me for months. How do you expect me to move past that? He took a step closer, his hands outstretched like he was begging. I'll go to therapy. We can go together. I'll cut Jessica out of my life completely. Just give me a chance to prove that I can change. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. Do you even hear yourself? You didn't just make a mistake, Ryan. You made a choice to betray me, to betray us. This isn't something you can fix with promises and apologies. He fell silent, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his actions had finally caught up to him. I need time, I said finally, my voice trembling. Time to figure out what I want, what I can live with. But right now, I can't even look at you. Ryan nodded slowly, his eyes filled with regret. I understand. Take all the time you need. I grabbed my keys and my bag, not sure where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay there. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I'd finally spoken my truth, and sorrow for the life I thought I'd have with Ryan, the life that was now crumbling before my eyes. I drove to my parents' house, knowing they'd be the only ones who could provide the comfort I desperately needed. My mom greeted me at the door, her face immediately clouding with concern when she saw mine. Emily, what's wrong? She asked, pulling me into a hug. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, and by the time I finished explaining, my mom's expression had shifted from shock to anger. Your father needs to know about this, she said firmly. He trusted Ryan, and he needs to know what kind of man he really is. I nodded, realizing she was right. But as much as I wanted to expose Ryan for what he'd done, a part of me wasn't ready for that yet. I needed to process everything first. As I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket with my mom by my side, I felt the first flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, to find strength in myself, and to figure out what I truly deserved. The next morning, I sat at my parents' kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in front of me. I hadn't told my dad yet. My mom said we should wait until he'd had his breakfast, as if softening the timing would somehow make the truth hurt less. When my dad walked in, cheerful as always, my heart clenched. He greeted me with a kiss on the forehead, his usual morning routine, and sat down with the newspaper. He had no idea the storm that was about to hit. Dad, I said after a moment, my voice shaky. He looked up from the paper, his brow furrowing. What's wrong, sweetheart? I glanced at my mom, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, I began. It's about Ryan, I said, my voice cracking. He's been cheating on me with Jessica. The words hung in the air, heavy and unbearable. My dad's face froze, and for a moment, I wasn't sure he'd heard me. Then, slowly, his expression darkened. What did you just say? He asked, his voice low and controlled. I repeated myself, tears welling in my eyes. My dad's jaw tightened, his hands clenching in a fist on the table. That son of a bitch, he muttered under his breath, standing abruptly. After everything I've done for him, after everything he promised you. My mom reached out, gently touching his arm. George, sit down. Let's think this through. But my dad wasn't having it. He paced back and forth in the kitchen, anger radiating off him. He used me. He used us. And Jessica, she's practically family. How could they do this to you? I stayed quiet, watching him struggle with his emotions. My dad was a man of principle, someone who believed in loyalty and hard work above all else. Ryan had been like a protege to him, and now that trust was shattered. Emily, my dad said finally, turning to me, what do you want to do? Do you want to end things? Confront him together? Whatever you decide, I'm with you. I swallowed hard, grateful for his support, but unsure of my next move. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I can't stay in that apartment with him. Not right now. Good, my dad said firmly. You can stay here as long as you need. And don't worry about the apartment. I'll make sure he's out of there. My mom chimed in, her voice calm but resolute. We'll handle this, sweetheart. You focus on taking care of yourself. For the first time in days, I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't alone in this. My parents had my back, and no matter what happened next, I knew I'd get through it. But as much as their support meant to me, the decision of how to move forward was mine alone. And I still didn't know what to do. A few days later, I decided I couldn't avoid the apartment anymore. My dad had offered to go with me, but I insisted on going alone. This was something I had to face myself. When I arrived, the place felt different, cold, unwelcoming, like it wasn't my home anymore. Ryan was sitting on the couch when I walked in, his face lighting up for a split second before he realized I wasn't there to reconcile. "Emily," he started, standing up. I held up my hand to stop him. "Don't," I said sharply. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to pack my things." His face fell, and he took a hesitant step toward me. "Emily, please. Can't we just—" "No, Ryan," I interrupted, my voice trembling with anger. "You don't get to ask for anything anymore. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." He stood there, frozen, as I walked past him and headed to the bedroom. My hands shook as I started packing my clothes, but I didn't let myself cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Ryan followed me to the doorway, leaning against the frame like he didn't know what to do with himself. "Emily, I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know I hurt you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I love you. I still love you." I stopped what I was doing and turned to face him, my eyes blazing. "You don't love me, Ryan. If you did, you wouldn't have done what you did. You wouldn't have betrayed me with my best friend." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You made me feel like I was crazy for doubting you. You lied to my face, over and over again. That's not love, Ryan. That's selfishness." He flinched at my words but didn't argue. For once, he didn't have a comeback. "I don't know what kind of person you are anymore," I continued, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "But I know what kind of person I am, and I deserve better than this." I finished packing my suitcase and zipped it shut. Ryan reached out as if to stop me, but I brushed past him without a second glance. As I walked out of the apartment, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness for what I'd lost, anger for what he'd done, and most surprisingly, a flicker of hope. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned, but maybe it was the beginning of something better. Leaving the apartment felt like walking away from a chapter of my life I'd never wanted to end. I drove back to my parents' house in silence, the weight of everything settling in my chest like a stone. When I arrived, my mom was waiting for me at the door. She didn't say anything, just pulled me into a tight hug. I let myself fall into her arms, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. For the next few days, I focused on taking care of myself. I threw myself into my work at the firm, grateful for the distraction. Designing the shopping center gave me something tangible to focus on, something I could control in the chaos of my personal life. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized I couldn't ignore what had happened. Ryan and Jessica had both reached out multiple times. Texts, voicemails, even emails, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. One evening, my dad sat me down in the living room. "Emily," he said gently, "have you thought about what you want to do next? About Ryan, the apartment, everything?" I nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about it a lot," I admitted. "I know I don't want him in my life anymore. I can't forgive what he did." My dad's face softened. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know how hard this has been, but you're handling it with so much strength." Hearing those words from him meant more than I could say. For so long, I'd worried about disappointing him, about how he'd react when he found out what Ryan had done. But knowing he supported me, no matter what, gave me the courage to take the next step. The following day, I reached out to a lawyer. I wanted to make sure everything with the apartment and any ties to Ryan was handled cleanly. My dad had already made it clear that Ryan would no longer be working for him, which was a small comfort. It wasn't easy, but as I started putting the pieces of my life back together, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. The day I finalized the legal side of separating from Ryan was both painful and liberating. The lawyer assured me that my father's ownership of the apartment made the process straightforward, and Ryan was formally removed from any claim to it. Knowing he had no hold over me anymore felt like I could finally breathe again. I still hadn't responded to any of Ryan or Jessica's messages. It wasn't because I didn't have things to say. I had plenty, but because I knew no words would bring me peace. They didn't deserve my time or energy anymore. One evening, Ryan showed up unannounced at my parents' house. I was in the kitchen when my dad opened the door. The minute he saw Ryan, his expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" my dad asked, his voice calm but firm. "I just want to talk to Emily," Ryan said, his tone desperate. My dad stepped outside, closing the door behind him. I peeked out the window and saw them talking on the porch. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see my dad shaking his head and Ryan gesturing animatedly. When my dad came back inside, he looked at me and said he's leaving. I told him you're done, and he needs to respect that. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I walked to the window and watched as Ryan got into his car and drove away. It felt like the final page of a book I never wanted to read again. That night, I sat down with my journal and wrote out everything I was feeling. The pain, the anger, the heartbreak, all of it. I didn't hold back. By the time I was done, my hand was cramping, but my mind felt lighter. I closed the journal and stared at it for a moment, then said aloud to myself, "This is where it ends." And I meant it. It's been a few months since everything happened, and while I'm still healing, I can finally say that I feel like myself again, or maybe even someone stronger. Losing Ryan and Jessica was devastating, but it forced me to take a hard look at my life and realize what I truly deserve. I threw myself into my work, and the shopping center project has been one of my best yet. It's amazing how much clarity comes when you focus on what makes you happy, rather than what others expect of you. My team and I celebrated the project's approval last week, and for the first time in ages, I felt genuinely proud of myself. As for Ryan and Jessica, I've cut them out of my life completely. Ryan tried reaching out a few more times, but I blocked his number. Jessica too. There's no room for people who don't value my trust and kindness. My dad has been my biggest supporter through all of this. He's made sure Ryan is out of his professional life as well, and his unwavering belief in me has been a lifeline. My mom, of course, has been just as incredible, always reminding me of my worth. One thing I've learned through this whole experience is that being kind and trusting isn't a weakness. It's a strength. Yes, people took advantage of it, but that says more about them than it does about me. I'll continue to be kind. I just know now to be kind to myself first. Last weekend, I finally moved back into the apartment. My dad insisted on having it deep cleaned and repainted before I returned, which was a sweet gesture. It feels like a fresh start, a place that's mine, no longer tainted by Ryan or Jessica. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not scared of it. I've learned that I'm capable of standing on my own, of building a life I'm proud of. If anyone reading this is going through something similar, my advice is simple. Trust your instincts. People who love you don't make you doubt yourself. And never, ever settle for less than you deserve. Here's to new beginnings.